When I was younger, I live in an East Asian country, and there people generalize any form of mental health to being crazy and needing to go to a mental asylum.
In my family, we're encouraged to put time aside to focus on ourselves and do the things that bring us happiness, since our happiness ties directly to our well-being and behavior.
In her own way of comforting my OCD, my mother revealed to me that she once had symptoms of possible OCD in her school days too, but overlooked it as her family insists that she must be resilient.
We don't tend to think of culture and mental health as related, but they interact with one another more than you'd think.
This is especially relevant in context of a multicultural country such as Canada.
I'm Georgia.
And I'm Laura Maria.
We're psychology undergrads at McGill, and we're both second-generation immigrants.
And today, we're discussing how cultural diversity interacts with mental health by drawing from literature relating it to first-hand experiences.
Let's start by defining what we mean by cultural diversity.
Humans can be diverse in a broad range of ways. When we talk about culture, we're looking at a collection of people who can identify with certain knowledge, beliefs, values, and other ways of thinking and behaving.
Now, this group doesn't need to be based on a specific race. It can also be based on nationality, spirituality or religion, political stance, or even places such as neighborhoods or workplaces.
The term cultural diversity comes in when we refer to the coexistence of these diverse cultures and extends to how people react to these other cultures and live in such a diverse environment. For example, Canada is one of many culturally rich countries, and it's all these people from different backgrounds that make up its diverse culture.
So, remember when I told you about this medical anthropology course that I took in my first semester?
Yeah, I remember you saying that by being exposed to all these new ideas, the course changed your perspective on human well-being.
It really did. I wasn't aware of how many factors can impact our health. We tend not to think of culture as something that interacts with our well-being, but it actually does play an important role in it. So one study we talked about in class that really stuck with me was one that was conducted by Tanya Lerman, which revealed that manifestations of delusional disorders followed cultural beliefs. In the US, the most common form of delusion was about the government, in Indonesia about spirits, and in India about mother-in-laws.
So we wondered if this also applies to other mental illnesses, and in fact, we do see an influence of culture when it comes to symptoms and other topics related to mental health.
Some literature suggests that certain cultures will express their mental illness symptoms more physically than what is clinically described as the norm.
There are actually mixed findings on whether some communities will tend to display more physical symptoms than they do more mental symptoms. Some studies show that rather than this being the case, it's the way some communities perceive mental health that shapes how they will evaluate symptoms. According to the Canadian Mental Health Association, perspectives on mental health can differ to the point where some cultures will attribute mental illness to spiritual awakening, bad luck, or karma.
It makes sense that your entourage can have an influence on how you might view mental health, but also, cultures vary in terms of how people relate to their groups. In individualist societies, such as Western countries, people value independence and individual freedom. Collectivist countries, on the other hand, value group harmony and see the individual as an extension of the group.
It sounds like collectivist societies really benefit from the close bonds people would form in such an environment.
In collectivist cultures, families can serve as a protective factor for an individual when offering support, but can also contribute to an individual's mental health issues when feelings of shame or dishonor are involved.
These feelings of shame are one of the many outcomes of stigma against mental health, and it can make people highly reluctant to seek treatment for their mental health issues.
Stigma can be experienced by people in the same culture, but we often hear about it in relation to racism and discrimination.
It can also take form in how someone will anticipate how people from other cultures will view them, specifically in discriminatory ways. To discuss the topic, Steve Peiken, host of The Agenda, interviews Kwame Mackenzie, professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto and director of diversity and mental health at the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health.
If you see other people who are being discriminated against, then you can imagine you're thinking, that might happen to me. And then when you're starting to apply for a job, you start to be concerned. The fact that you didn't get the job then has other consequences. And so the other effects are these economic effects. And those economic effects are all linked to developing mental health problems. So there's the effect of racism, there's a fear of racism, and then there's the impact of racism that it actually has on your chances in life, all of which are important.
I'd say he put it nicely how the effect, fear, and impact of racism can influence an individual's mental health. You'd expect treatment to be a positive way for someone to deal with issues related to racism.
So while seeking treatment may help with the consequences of stigma and discrimination, health practitioners could also be the ones perpetuating them. Mental health workers might misinterpret or overlook mental health symptoms of clients who are different from themselves. Their biases and stereotyping, whether the workers are aware of them or not, might then affect the outcomes of subsequent interventions and may make clients even more reluctant to seek help in the future. However, there's definitely something that can be done to reduce the occurrence of such situations.
When it comes to building a strong patient-therapist relationship, cultural factors of both parties should be taken into consideration. Kwame Mackenzie said that we need a plan when it comes to improving the mental health system.
Well, we might want to know who we've got here. We might want to know what their needs look like. We might want to know what they might like us with regards to treatment and what treatment is effective. We might want to do something like produce language structures or a language competency strategy, which means that people can actually get services in their language if need be. There are loads of things we can do, but we need a plan. We have no plan.
Making treatment more accessible by offering it in more languages is definitely a way to adapt to a multicultural society, which could help us attain more equal access to care. And SAPSER, for example, a Quebec-based organization which offers specific psychological interventions for immigrants and refugees, does exactly that.
Surely language can't be the only area in which we can improve the structure of mental health treatment.
Of course, it would be important for the practitioner to be informed on broader topics such as historical background or cultural tradition, but also to go into the specifics. For example, coping mechanisms can vary depending on culture, and these details are also important to consider.
Reshaping mental health interventions can be challenging, but it is a necessary step.
Practitioners should be able to look inward and be ready to confront and change any assumptions they may have about people that are different from them. What's important to understand is that there is no one-fits-all definition to mental health and illness. Going forward, both psychological research and treatment interventions should be constructed in ways that are mindful of different cultural backgrounds and adapt accordingly.
We looked at how different cultural factors influence mental health, such as perceptions, group belonging, stigma, and how we can better take them into consideration when dealing with mental health. Canada prides itself for welcoming people from around the world, so it should be as welcoming when it comes to therapeutic environments where people are meant to feel safe and at ease.
Immigrant populations might already face certain barriers in everyday life, and accessing mental health care should not be a process that ends up becoming an additional stressor.
Hence, cultural diversity is an important factor to consider when structuring mental health treatment in populations as diverse as the one in Canada.
We hope that our discussion on how cultural diversity interacts with mental health made you reconsider how to approach mental well-being.
We wanted to say a special thank you to everyone who recorded their experiences, namely Kimberly Vu, Naomi Lurye, and Sin-Ning Su.
Our research has been made possible thanks to articles written by the following authors: Carstea et al., Gopal Krishnan and Babakan, Huang and Zain, Kermeyer and Ban, Kermeyer and Ryder, Lerman, Foucault, and Martin Borges.
And the audiovisual interview of Kwame Mackenzie provided by The Agenda with Steve Piken. You can find our full bibliography in the description below.
If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of this episode.
And for that, we sincerely thank you.